Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here again. Thank you very much as always for taking the time to tune in today. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Mark Nara, who is here to discuss his approach to tattooing that is both deeply spiritual and profoundly innovative. And you'll know what I mean by that when we get into the conversation. Many of us spend countless hours endlessly pursuing guidance on the nature of one's inner self, identity, and spiritual essence. Books, podcasts, retreats, medicines, all in the pursuit of understanding the answers to the questions: why do I exist? What's my true purpose? What am I doing here? How can I get better? How can I better understand where there is a universal consciousness or some sort of spiritual force? And more importantly, if there is, how do I connect with it? And that's what we're going to get into today. Mark's message will help all listeners reframe tattooing so that your tattoos, or your prospective tattoos, if you don't have one just yet, become the number one tool on your search for the answers. With over 15 years tattoo experience, he has dedicated his career to redefining the tattoo experience by reconnecting modern society with the ancient wisdom of tattooing as a sacred, transformative practice. People think their tattoos have meaning, but what does it actually mean to get tattooed? Our tattoos are the most overlooked and undervalued tool for navigating the endless maze of personal growth and self-development. The most overlooked and undervalued. I'm so excited to have this conversation. I really am. And unlike the mainstream tattoo industry, which often emphasizes aesthetics or self-focused artistry, Mark's guidance is rooted in intentionality and orienting oneself towards a path of betterment. Through his platform, Tattoo Pathway, Mark teaches individuals how to approach tattooing as a form of self-refinement and personal evolution, offering insight and guidance that you won't find anywhere else in the industry. And this is what sets him apart as the go-to guide for those seeking to mark their transformative experience. A long and very profound bio, but very, very worthwhile. And you'll know why when we get to the conversation. Mark, thank you very, very much for joining me today.
No worries, Gary. Thanks for having me. It's funny sitting in and listening to that, hey, because it's like there's so much truth there around what it said, but I just feel like deflecting it as well at the same time.
Yeah.
Such a big thing to be putting out. So, thanks for having me.
Oh no, I'm delighted, and this is a poignant podcast for me, and for a variety of reasons. One, I typically don't show my tattoos off, in terms of, certainly in a professional setting, not because of any shame or any stigma or anything. I don't want people to be distracted. I want them to listen, hear, and understand me and who I am, what I'm doing, especially when I had a career in corporate land. So today is my first podcast that I'm recording that I have short sleeves, and we might have an opportunity to show some of the ink that is on my body. And I do have. Well, you and I chatted about this before, and I said I have a lot of tattoos, and you said, well, you actually just have one. And we can maybe get to talking about that as we go forward. But just to kick things off, if one when we were chatting previously, you had mentioned the kind of evolution of tattooing, and what it was originally conceived for, how it was perceived if you had a tattoo, what that meant in terms of your essentially your social standing, and how that's evolved to today. So could you just take the listeners and viewers through a wee bit of your understanding of the evolution of tattooing?
Yeah, completely. Yeah, most people think of tattoos and we run with the definition that we have, where it's just pigment in the skin, a permanent mark
Yeah.
in the skin, right? That's what you'll find in the
Yeah.
dictionary. And that term was coined about the 1700s, from one of the expeditions to Tahiti. And it's an onomatopoeia. So it's like a play on the sound of the actual tools that were doing the tattooing over in Tahiti, right? But they had already developed a really extensive process in the Pacific Islands and all over the world. It's like every nation on the planet was marking their body for millennia prior to us even coming up with the word, and so it's been a few hundred years since then. And in that sort of period, there was all of these different things that started to shift our understanding of what it was. There was this introduction into, I guess, the forming globalized Western world. But at the same time, it went from something in all these older cultures that was really elevated. It was like quite significant within the culture. Everyone understood what tattooing was about, and it wasn't an artistic expression. Adornment or the visual or the aesthetic was kind of a bonus. It was a byproduct. They were doing the process for other reasons. A lot of it was initiatory, rites of passage, which would move someone into a different social standing that have different expectations and sort of be allowed to do different things or whatever it is. But there was also the psychological process of moving someone through maybe like an adolescent psychology into a healthy adult psychology. And that's on a simple level. Another level that's like really interesting if we go that far back is that their whole world experience was also quite supernatural.
Right.
And that gives the tattoo process a context that's bigger than just like me in this group of people. It's like me and my group of people that I belong to in this world and in this cosmological structure. So it's really specific. The process they were in was really specific to placing them and knowing who they are and what their purpose was, like individually within this group, within the world, within the spirit world. So it was really, really refined, really specific, really meaningful, really valuable, and collectively understood. And then that period where we start to develop our current lens, or something that's the precursor to our current lens, was tattooing was stopped and ruptured in most of these different places through like misunderstanding, basically, when different people are sort of coming across each other, different voyages of discovery around the world. And unfortunately, there was like lots of ruptures in these processes. So a lot of it got stopped. A lot of it's being revived today. But tattooing went through a kind of change of guard, or like a magnetic change. And it went from being a positive tool to a negative one. So the same people that stopped tattooing started to employ it to mark slaves, to mark, prisoners of war were getting tattooed, criminals were getting tattooed, to sort of show this outcast status. And so tattooing is like a non-specific amplifier. It's like it sort of like boosts something. There's a power in getting tattooed that everyone's aware of. If you get it, if you see someone with tattoos, you're aware of it.
Yeah.
And so at that point, that power kind of got, I guess, adopted by the people that we were marking, which were the criminal ring, a lot of the time. So there was this change of guard, which over the past 300 years created a whole bunch of stereotypes, like the one you were just talking about. Like, I can't show it in a professional status. I can't show it in these environments. So tattoos are bad, or they're on the fringe, or they're for the alternate community. We've been running that for generations, and then just the past maybe 20 years, we've started to sort of come out of that space, remove the stereotypes, and come into a place where it's like, hey, it's really accessible and acceptable, but it hasn't been elevated back to where it came from. So it kind of has come from really high, it's fallen down into a place that's kind of really low. And now we're sort of like removing all of the charge that's negative, but it's kind of empty at the moment. For most people, it's kind of null and void. There's meaning, but the meaning's still kind of skipping along the surface of people really connecting to where it's come from and its sort of full potential. So that's a quick overview of the history.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it, and that's I was really purposeful about asking that question first, just to set the scene for our known understanding of the evolution of how it all came to be. Prestige, power, status,
Mm,
eminence, whatever you want to call it, and then to the depths of despair, to the criminal element. And it's kind of funny. I smiled a wee bit when you were telling me that, because
mm,
even today, if I bump into someone with tattoos, especially if I'm covered up, I use humor to break the ice with certain people, and with most people. And if I see someone with tattoos, I'll be like, "Oh, like I didn't realize you were in jail." And then, based on their reaction, will determine whether we're going to be friends or not. If they're kind of like, "All right,
yeah.
okay, haha," or if I'm showing my tattoos and someone says, "Oh, where did you get those?" They're asking about which artist has done them, or which shop that I went to, or studio. And I'll say, "Well, this was juvie, and this was just in my first stint, back in the day," and things. Again, humor, just to try and create a connection. But I was actually chatting with some folks earlier today, and I've developed a habit, and I probably didn't do this before, Mark, if I'm being honest, but
Yeah.
probably about 10, it's probably about 10 years ago, maybe about 10 years ago, maybe even a wee bit longer, where if I see anyone, especially in a setting, which the one that comes to mind is in a restaurant, and one of the servers, is walking around, and if they've maybe got the sleeves rolled up, if it's a guy or if it's a lassie, she's got in some way exposure on her arms, or her neck, or whatever it looks like. I always make a point of asking,
Mm,
what's the significance? I haven't seen something like that before. What's the significance of that? 99.9% of them, if they have the time, they are more than delighted to talk about it, and explain the significance to them. And some of the stories are so poignant and so intricate and well thought out, that I'm thinking, wow,
hmm.
and that's a representation of that relationship you had with that distant relative that you didn't know, and who came into your life very late on in their life, and early in yours. And it's just brilliant. And I know that typically the people I'm with are always like, come on, going to stop. Like, just, okay, you've got tattoos, they've got tattoos, big deal. But it's genuine. It's a genuine
Mm,
desire to say, I know most of my story, and I'm hoping that you're going to be able to explain a wee bit more of my story and my journey today. I know mine, and I would love to know yours. And the very odd person just says, I just liked it, But
yep.
for the most
Yep.
part, the majority of people, it's, despite it being that, there's no stigma attached to it anymore, or the stigmas are going away, certainly in the majority of circles that I travel in, and it being very accessible. I live in Calgary in Canada here, and there's tattoo shops on every corner, literally, almost,
Yeah.
downtown
Yeah. There we
anyway.
do.
So you don't have to, it's not a secret society or anything completely clandestine that you have to kind of sneak around and move in different circles. You can get it if you want, so, and then people are choosing to do that. So I'd like to know just a wee bit more about your personal journey. As I'd mentioned in the bio, over 15 years, that's a long time to be doing that type and style of work, and the evolution of how you started to where you are and what you're doing right now. I'd be interested to find out a bit more about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Firstly, the humor that you bring in around it, so
Yeah,
good. It's such a beautiful thing to bring in, because if someone's still carrying this inherited program around tattoos as being bad,
yeah,
it's like that's the perfect way to just warm it up, melt it
yeah,
down a bit. That's great. It's great. I
yeah,
love it. I try and do a similar thing. I try and do a similar thing with people as well. Just be lighthearted about it, especially
yeah,
if they're carrying something like that into an exchange. You know,
yeah.
just try and melt
I
it a
love
little bit for them, so you can
it.
move on. But because we are also their experience of tattooed people. Like that's part of
Yeah,
it. And I think
yes,
before I sort of zoom back to where I started with it, just to talk about where we currently are and why I think a conversation like this is even happening, because it probably wouldn't have been sort of of interest 10 years ago,
yeah,
is that exposure that's happening. So it's like anyone in the older generations that still has the old program around tattooing being this fringe thing, is having to understand it more because they're coming into contact with it more. So there's just more conversation, there's more exposure,
Yeah.
and the less people can be, I guess, like offended by someone who thinks something of them for their tattoos, and can just sort of crack a
Yeah.
smile and talk to them about it, and
Yeah.
talk to it for what it is, the better, and then that imprinting is going to continue to move tattooing in a direction that I think's beneficial for everyone,
Yeah.
and like we said, hopefully we can add some value in. So the history that I just went over before too, just to give it a real simple analogy that we can bring through the rest of the conversation, is like when water comes out the base of like a mountain or like a source,
Yeah.
like a spring, it's like really rich, right? It's got all of these different minerals in it. And then as it sort of flows down, and starts to come into like man-made structures, we might start to dam and like put it through different systems, piping systems and whatever. It starts to get distorted in a way. Its mineral structure does, and it potentially even gets contaminated. And then depending what we use the water for, etc. So similar things happen with the tattooing. It's gone from like really rich into our hands. We twist it a bit, and then when it comes out the tap in our house, if we're aware of that contamination, we start to filter it. That's the current stage we're in. We're filtering it, right? But the water that ends up in the glass is quite empty in terms of its nutritional value. So everyone can drink the water now and use it to wash and whatever. But if we really want to get it back to where it started, we've got to reintroduce a whole bunch of value. We need to reintroduce those like high magnesium salts and all those sorts of things to like really get the benefit. So we're in that stage. My personal process up till now, my own journey, I'd say, is like I had the program that tattoos were bad. None of my parents had tattoos. I think one of my grandparents did, but I never met him. I think he had one because he was in the army or something. Passed away before I was born. But so I had this program of tattoos bad. I remember drawing them. I had a mate in high school that, got one when he was 16 on his shoulder. I drew it for him and went there with him and stuff. But I was like, I'd never get them. And part of it was like, my grandparents would, hate me, and my parents would probably get upset, and what would people think, and the career space, all those things played out. But at one stage, when I finished high school, I started doing visual arts at university, and probably about 18. That same stage, I was starting to like break out of the village mindset or the mold, the inherited mold. You want to go through your own kind of process. And I was doing things like a lot of spray painting and graffiti and things like that. Kind of contained. I wasn't like a crazy vandal or anything. Just going out and just doing some painting on the street, and had this mindset of, I don't know if you know Banksy, the street artist Banksy. Yeah. So it was like kind of just when he was coming into, I guess, like mass awareness, all the things he was doing. I was like, this guy's an artist. He's bringing things out of the white walled gallery, and he's doing it on the street. And there was something about that spirit that I think probably popped the lock for me on like, oh, maybe tattoos are an interesting space to work in because it's very honest. I remember studying visual arts and graphic design and being like, I can do an artwork directly for somebody and they pay me for it and it's theirs. It's not going to go up in value and be hung on a wall and sold on to someone else. So there was some layer there that got me interested in tattooing. And then it was a pursuit of artistry for a very long time, wanting to be the best artist I could. And that started my journey of collecting my own tattoos, so ending up with like the tattoo uniform, I'd say, developing my own tattoos. And then it was around, I think it was around 2012. So I started in 2008.
Right.
I started tattooing. And I think it was about 2012, I started to go through a bit of a shift of awareness that, hey, like maybe there's a bit more to this tattoo thing. And that was paralleling, hey, maybe there's a bit more to life. Maybe I don't want to be like the guy at uni and the tattooist that's getting paid cash and blowing it in the city, getting drunk and, making a muck of myself. So there was this like, what am I doing? Maybe there's a bit more to this. I should pay closer attention to what I'm spending my time doing and who I am, because it's, there's some conflict here, who I think I am and then the things that I'm doing, what's going on. And so at the same time that came into tattooing. I'm like, what am I doing tattooing people, and why are people getting tattooed?
Yeah.
And so I was playing that out for a bit, and then a few major things happened. One of them was traveling, meeting some tattooists that were like more intentional around what they were doing as I was exploring this stuff, like in Mexico in the jungle. Coming back and meeting my first kind of like spiritual teacher. I was raised Catholic school, Catholic university. Didn't really get under the surface for me at all. It was all head knowledge.
Right.
But I had a Native American holy man, like a road priest that would do things like sweat lodges and vision quests for people. And I ended up in contact with this fella, and it took a while, but I ended up apprenticing with him. And he kind of exposed me to a whole bunch of deeper layers, I suppose, in simple words, deeper layers to experience our life experience. And that really ramped up the like intentional tattoo journey, or like almost the medicinal tattoo journey, understanding tattooing as something that's there to help people, I guess, cultivate a more structured way of viewing their whole walk of life, so that everything they're doing becomes extremely focused, connected to something that's beyond themselves, So I started to bring that in. So it went like extremely deep and spiritual quite quickly, because again, it's, my life is paralleling what I'm sort of doing in the work, so as I'm in this deep dive there, taking people into that place. And I'd say the past 5 years has started to sort of like level back out into this, I guess just a more fitted approach to everybody, because it's like, when you're tattooing, you're meeting people from all walks of life. Everyone's at very different points in their experience, and all of our life journeys look very different. And so Tattoo Pathway, what I'm doing now, has come out of this past 5 years of just really, again, paying close attention. What's the current climate of the tattoo culture, a contemporary one? What's it look like? Why are people doing it? And then trying to also sort of marry and bring these things in that are, like I said, those salts, trying to add stuff back to the experience to, I guess, reinvigorate what was there, the spirit of tattooing that's been beneficial for a long time, So slowly we're doing that. Yeah.
I love the journey you've gone on, in terms of, it sounds like there's been a whole bunch of intentionality to every single, intentionality in terms of, this has to mean something to me. It has to be connected to something greater, bigger, deeper, whatever that looks like. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm willing to take on board various influences from different areas and such, and move forward. And then, as you say, kind of, level it back out to a point where you're kind of like, right, okay, I think this is actually what it is and what it looks like. And one of the things he said at the end there makes me think of the artist that I use now. A big shout out to Steve Peace here in Calgary from Immaculate Concept Tattoos. He's been my artist now for, it must be about 10, 15 years, something like that. And he's brilliant, and he'll put stuff on. He's quite active in social media, and he'll put stuff on. And the one main thing that resonated with me, I don't see a lot of stuff on social media because I'm not on it too often, but one of the main things that he put on, it was almost like a campaign. It was, trust your artist. Trust the artist. You go and explain who you are, where you're at in your journey, what you're looking for, why it's important, and give them some logistics in terms of positioning and such, the physical location, but then let him do what he's he's crafted, that he's perfected over decades and decades and decades of doing this. And I think back to the beginning, and I would go in and I say, I've got this, I've got it now. This is a brilliant idea. I've got these 3 random Google Images pictures that I've downloaded and printed, and I'm like, I want this, and it's going to go down. Then there's going to be a stream, and I'm right into explaining it, and then I look over, and he's kind of giving me a stare, and he'll go, just leave them there, and then come back, make an appointment, and then come back, and I'd be like, yeah, I think we're artist to artist, we're talking away, and I think we're on the same page. Then I would come back, and it would be something I wouldn't even say the exact opposite, because mine was just so bizarrely random. And he would say, based, especially the longer we've spent time together and the more we've gotten to know each other, especially him getting to know me, he says, what about this? Nothing like what I asked for, nothing like what I said or anything. And every single time, bar none, I have said, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. And then we've went ahead, because he has skills and insights, and deeper insights than I have. It's not a whim. It's not anything. I think this will look good. This will complement what we have here. And I've not been easy on him, because I've had a few cover-ups. I've had some strict stipulations about colours to use and not to use. I'm not a fan. I have a wee bit of green, but I'm not a fan of green, because I support Glasgow Rangers and our arch rivals play in green, so there's no green. And he's like, how can you get a Scottish sleeve with no green on it? And I'm saying, well, you're the artist. I'm trusting you. So, so there's various conversations around that. It ends up becoming, for me, Mark, it's like I'm on this journey with him, and I'm privileged that him and I get to walk together as part of my journey, at the same time. And I hope that he feels the same. I'm not 100% sure. He might say no, but I don't think so. And, and it's one of these, when you and I started chatting just about the concept of the deepness and the relativeness of my life versus my art versus how I'm representing myself through that, I hadn't really thought about it in that level of detail. And it makes the interactions that I've had with Steve over the years all the more funny, now when I'm standing there as the dumb customer going, oh, and I want this and I want that, and he's like, oh. And he was always very polite and stuff, apart from the death stare that he would give me. But it was that trust in the artist that I didn't really truly appreciate until he articulated it by literally saying, trust your artist. They know more than you do about this. Come with an open mind. There'll be some people saying, this is exactly what I want because it's my son's footprint. It's an image of my grandma before she passed, or something like that, of course. But when you're going in saying, I want to represent myself in this way, and I think this is what it is, being open enough that there might be another way to do it would be a thing.
Yeah.
And I say this from a position of sitting in the chair and he's quite open about letting other customers come in just to have a quick chat as he's tattooing me. And I like it as well, because as you say, different walks of life, different people at different ages and stages. And I just find it kind of fascinating. And he'll just to see him interacting with them. Are they striking up a bond? Are they actually understanding each other? His response wasn't what I thought it would be to what she asked for. And it's just this fascinating union, this fascinating bond that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. And then I go back a few months later and I say, whatever happened with that person who came in? She never came back. Or, she didn't get that. We had a conversation. She eventually got this. And it's such a journey, and it's fascinating and it's deep and it's magic and it's profound. Do you find that?
Yeah, totally. And there's so many things that you just explained in your experience that, like, was it Scott that you said your artist was?
Steve.
Do you know how long he's been tattooing? Long time, I'm guessing.
I don't actually. I would imagine probably over 30 years.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, the things you're explaining where he's able to like synthesize your ideas and give you exactly what you wanted, but you didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And his capacity to it sounds like, guide his clients in a way that optimizes what it is that they're going for. It is magical. Like it's an amazing thing, you know. And unfortunately, that's starting to get lost because there's such an ease of access. This like current, this real current, you know, like past 5 years, you know, even
Right.
post COVID, sort of, there's this whole wave of people coming into the space on both ends, receiving and giving tattoos that are of almost trying to bypass that tier of knowledge and expertise and transference. You sort of don't pick it up.
Yeah.
Like, you're picking it up because you're spending so much time there
Mhm.
and you're watching it happen, and you're like, wow, there's a particular way to do this. There's a particular way to build and
Yes.
construct this thing on the body that people don't have the knowledge. The technical knowledge isn't there. You know,
Yeah.
they're not architects and builders, you know. Whereas someone like your artist Steve, who's been doing it for a very long time, you know, he's probably had years initially of maybe not knowing fully how to construct the thing that someone's asking for, and so he's probably had to construct things in a way that wasn't perfect in the past. You know, that's what's informed him, right? Um,
Yeah.
and through that, it's like someone that spends time with him can pick that up without making those mistakes as much, or, you know, for as
Yeah.
long, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, you've highlighted one of these things that really is valuable. You know, so not to go back to our water analogy, right? It's like the
Yeah.
stripping of everything out and it being empty. It's like it's almost more, it's more empty in this, on this spiritual sense, the spiritual wisdom.
Mhm.
Technically, there's lots of value there. You know, it's like I I can remember being you know, an apprentice and in younger stages and being like, oh man, this old school industry, you know, they're like grumpy old cynical dudes and no 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 no. And then, but
Yeah.
now I'm in a place where I'm just like, man, all of these lessons that they had and a lot of their boundaries that were in place were
Yeah.
really important mechanisms for them, for the craft of tattooing and the business, and for the people
Yeah.
coming to get tattooed. You know, they might be a little bit abrasive in how they put things across
Yeah.
to people
Yeah.
at times. You know, a lot of the spaces I was in, they were, but, you know,
Yeah.
not tattooing a young kid's hands before he has a sleeve. You know, not putting
Yeah.
something on someone's face just because they come in and they're adamant that they want to get it. You know,
Yeah.
um, not putting the 20 different ideas someone has into one tattoo. You know, because they
Yeah.
haven't got tattooed yet and they're trying to fit their whole life in it. You know,
Yeah.
those things are really important, and, you know, hopefully we can, hold on to them, and the kind of the new wave of tattooing that comes through doesn't overtake and
Yeah.
overgrow too much. But, you know, that's part of, I guess,
Do
part of
you
these
think?
conversations we're having too.
Well, exactly that. And I was just going to say there, do you think, you know, things tend to work in waves, or I like to analogize it as a pendulum. You know, we swing one way, and then that doesn't really become as palatable as people thought, and then we go, right, okay, whap, and we go straight the other way, and you're like, no, 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 we don't have to go back to that. There's a happy medium for where we're at, where society is at, where the world is at today. That's somewhere in between. Do you see us kind of coming back from this transactional commodity, my words, not your words, but coming back from something that's a little bit less intentional, less spiritual, less meaningful, and getting to a point where there's a happy blend of, there are always going to be people who do the randoms and the kind of fun stuff and the Vegas. I've done that as
Mm-mm.
well. You know, the Vegas,
Yeah, yeah,
silliness and such, to a point where there is that intentionality, there is that direction, there is that purpose, there is that investment of the time and effort. Do you
yeah.
see
Look,
that coming
I
back?
think there's place for all of the different layers, so I think they'll exist for sure.
Yeah.
Um, I think there's probably, and it depends on the country, right? So like here in Australia, what the licensing is like. I don't know what it's like in Canada or America or Europe. I haven't looked into it. But I know here, for example, there's this need for some type of curation within this space of, I guess, tattoo education and training, and some standards being put in place. There's a guild working towards that, and it was like hands off for a long time, and like not wanting that to come in because it was just so old school, But now it's getting to a place where it's like, well, if people that are in that position, such as your artist here, the old heads, don't start doing something, then it's like the void's going to be filled by someone else. And here we've been seeing that like being trying to be filled by kind of like opportunistic business people that have no idea about the industry at all, creating like crazy money-making entities that have no ethical standard at all. So I think there's probably going to be a particular vein of people that go quite intentional and sort of bring their awareness to the layers that I'm interested in taking people through. One that's like more than just the artwork, really transformational process. I think the art will just continue to just go in all of these different profound directions that it goes in. People doing just things I never thought were possible with art these days, and that's great. And I think it'll probably continue to spin out in this direction of like anti-art, the ignorant tattoos. Because there's different archetypes in how people engage with tattooing. It's like through their tattoos, you can kind of like almost qualify people as these different sort of psychological archetypes, the way they relate with it. And one of the really common ones is the rebel, and so it's the person that's going against mum and dad or going against the system, and they want to get tattooed as a like, you can't tell me what to do, I do whatever I want type of thing. And that as a bit of a subculture within tattooing itself is going off the rails. I mean, it's always been there, but it's like you can't get a flaming skull on your forearm and think you're a badass anymore. It's like it's just super common, right? So these days it's getting pretty intense. It's like, how about we just scratch stuff all over our face, or like, how about we chop an ear off, and it's getting really extreme. If you want to sort of be on the fringe with it these days, it's going extreme. So I think it will continue, kind of all of the different avenues, I think, are going to continue to just kind of like blow out in all of these directions. And I think all anyone can do in any of those places, like myself, like your artist, is continue to sort of like build our own structure up in a way that's supportive. And for me, I'm trying to look towards the future a little bit and go, so what's sustainable in this process that I'm doing with people? What's going to allow, firstly, just the person I'm tattooing today to continue to have an experience with their own tattoos themselves, potentially with me, through the future, that's positive, that's optimistic, that actually provides some benefit for them. I don't want people walking away and in 10 years going like, I can't believe that guy went through this process with me and tattooed this thing on me. Right. Which I think, I think in a lot of the spaces that are kind of emerging that I'm talking about is like, maybe not optimal in the long term, will lead people. Now on that, this is a great opening. It's like on that, it's like the way I'm going with people and the way that I've had to sort of approach my own tattoos is that we're always growing and changing, right? So like, a real simple framework is that your tattoos end up being the story of your journey through life. And so if you do get to this point of, like I have in a couple of different stages, having some type of like self-analysis, going like, can I steer the ship differently because I don't like where it's going, or I don't like where it's been, then all of your tattoos open up this like breadcrumb trail for you to look at, and this goes back to what you were saying at the start in the bio, where it's like, it's an overlooked tool. There's people that are they're covered in these like fingerprints that if they did the forensic on it would completely point them to all of the things that they need to acknowledge in order to move into or away from, into that person they want to be, away from the person, or to understand the person that they've been. Everything's there. And so even if someone goes down that sort of like rebel stage, scratchy face, as much as like it might be a hard thing to come back from, at the same time, it's like a very blatant and in their face, no pun intended, footprint for them to look at, and go like, what was happening for me at that stage? And if they're able to, lean into the uncomfort or look at the thing that, potentially is in the shadow or whatever it is, that's a really useful thing. So part of what I'm putting together is like understanding that there is all of these multiple streams. They're always going to exist. That's totally okay. We can't say that one stream's wrong for someone at any particular stage, because that's probably exactly what they need at that point in time. There's some layer of curation that I acknowledge that's like perfect beyond our comprehension, right? Everything's happening the way it's meant to happen. But this stream of more than tattooing, or the tattoo pathway, is like, okay, where are people going to end up with their tattoos? And can we establish something that allows course correction for them, or that gives them some way of understanding what it is that they've been doing for the past, 5, 10, 20 years. And if someone's like in a place where they can join it from day dot, great. But
I was actually just going to ask that. So it's a perfect segue. What does that look like? So in terms of recommendations for someone listening to this today that says, I have the appointment already set up, I know exactly what I want, or I'm thinking about this, it's something that I'm going to get on the journey of, what would your recommendation be from day dot to say, this will be a more meaningful journey for you, do it with intention, this is the process I would recommend you follow? What does that look like, Mark?
Yeah, okay. Well, there's a few different options. It depends really like how far someone wants to go with it, but obviously doing your research is important. Like yourself, just seeing who they're, as in terms of finding an artist, who do you have access to initially is a pretty good one, and trying to find someone who's credible beyond their own self-proclaimed credibility, or their social media following and stuff, right? A lot of the really good artists, the ones that understand sort of these time-told maxims like we've spoken about in the past, they're not all really good on the social media stuff. A lot of them, a bit late to the game or whatever. So there's lots of good artists out there that you might just have to look for. But the main thing I sort of explain to people is that the reason why you're getting it's the most important thing, not what you're getting. So a lot of people get caught up on the what, It's like the what's obviously the surface. What you get tattooed is the surface, right? It's here. Why you're getting it is under the surface. It's the deeper thing. It's the inner mechanisms, right? And so getting really, really clear on why you're getting tattooed is super important. And then the next one in terms of like when you get tattooed also is not pressuring that. So a lot of people will rush. It's like it's in an excited stage, or it's in an emotionally charged stage, or so just taking your time and making sure that everything's actually in place for you to do it. The initial kick of the excitement's worn out, or the emotion of whatever the catalyst has been processed. Giving it that time to really sit, and then you still have the same why. So just taking the time with it, still the same reason. Then you can go into, like you said, finding someone and trusting that they have they have the capacity of taking people on multiple voyages. So they know, yes, I know you want to go on this journey, but we don't really need to do all of these loops and go over that hill and go this way to get there. We can kind of go this way and see all those things. It'll be far more effective, you know, more respectful of your time and your skin, and same with mine. So finding someone you can trust, that relationship with the person that tattoos you is a really big one. So I think another important consideration, if you are trying to get tattooed in a way that's like very meaningful, is being able to express that to the person that's tattooing you. You don't have to dump things on them. Depends on their level of openness and how much openness you want from them, right? But you don't want someone that's dismissive of it. I think that's an important one. So it's like you can get artists that'll just like, you know, you had an artist that was like giving you a look of like, when you were explaining the idea, that's one thing, right? But he didn't go like, Gary, you're an idiot. That's rubbish.
Yeah.
He just said, leave it with me. I understand you.
Exactly.
I probably understand you more than you understand yourself. Come back and we'll do something. That's important. That's an important thing. Where if it's someone that's kind of, I guess, trying to cut your idea down so they can put their idea over the top.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a red flag, you know. So just having awareness of the dynamic where it's like, it needs to be a respectful exchange. They need to listen to you. You need to listen to them. And that needs to kind of be this like reciprocal, comfortable process, you know. And the direction of it should probably be a little bit heavier on the artist. Until you really know what you're doing. If you've spent 30 hours with them, right? And you're 5-10 years in, like you've said, you could probably come in and steer it a bit more because you've got a comprehension of how they work, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But initial stages, it's like, someone that's trustworthy, that's, you know, open to hearing where you're at, and then feels that they can give you adequate direction on it and you feel comfortable. That's the goal. That's really the goal, because it's usually a long-term thing. You get that right, you don't really need to go anywhere else, you know. That's probably another thing we can bring from the past, is like, there probably wasn't a tattoo artist on every corner of the village back in the day, you know, just tattooing whoever asked. There was probably a very well-established relationship where it's like, this is probably the person that'll be doing this thing, this process for you that's really important. And through time, it'll deepen and deepen and deepen and deepen. And that adds all these layers. Adds these layers of like accountability for what it is that you're going in for. You know, you can't go in and say like, hey, I want to get this tattoo because I'm this person, and go out and be a complete contradiction to yourself within the village, and then turn up to that person again, because they'll be like, you're full of shit. Go somewhere else.
Get lost.
So there's those layers. There's those layers there where I think what we're pointing out is that the relationship is quite a key thing, you know, beyond just the result, what you want. It's like thinking of the beyond that result, through time, what you're developing with someone and getting that trust there. Yeah,
absolutely. Such food for thought, and I really truly hope that comes across through the conversation that we've had. You can do the sporadic, spur of the moment, impulsive thing, of course, and I've been guilty of that myself. Or if you have the time, the wherewithal, and you understand, or you take the time to understand the why, and then test it and see if your why changes. And if it doesn't change, then okay, you have the foundation, and then you can start to layer and you know, build up from that foundation to get yourself to a spot through research, through experience, through, you know, testimonials, whatever it looks like, wherever it is you're going to do your research, to give yourself that opportunity for the best experience now. Because I can't ever imagine going anywhere else to get a tattoo other than with Steve, unless I was traveling and I thought, you know what, I'm going to mark this poignant occasion with, I see a shop there, it looks quite good, I've done some research, they seem to have a good reputation, and I would square it with Steve first, personally, you know, just to make sure he's okay. But I think it's one of these things, you know, I mean, it's almost like a life lesson, truly, Mark, you know, like, don't jump into something that you've not really thought through, especially something that has more permanence than, I purchased this meal and I didn't really like it and I'm never going to go to that restaurant again. This is something that you have for life. And I've got a few tattoos that over time people have said, do you regret that? Would you do something different? And I say, well, those are two different questions. The first answer to the regret, absolutely not. That's exactly what I wanted at the time. It was what I thought it was going to be. It turned out actually even better than I thought it was going to turn out like. And I was very, very happy with it. Knowing what I know now, having evolved and grown spiritually, physically, mentally, socially, and such, I probably wouldn't get that. If I had a blank canvas on that particular part of my body today, I would probably go for something different. But I don't look upon it as disdainful or the face palm where I'm thinking, I can't, why would I do that? Like, what was the point of that?
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things. I'm evolving as my tattoos are evolving, and it gives myself that opportunity. And I loved what you said earlier about the fingerprints and the forensics. You already have the information. You're just, I can imagine it almost like, you're walking around with the glasses on your head and you're trying to look for your glasses, or you get the car keys in your hand and you're like, where's my bloody car keys? And you're like, they're right there. You have what you need right now, and kind of moving on from there. So I could talk about this all day, and I hope this is not the last time we get an opportunity to talk about this, Mark, because we've only scratched the surface, if you pardon the pun here. And so this is called The Best You, a coaching podcast. And what I'd like to ask you, before I ask how people can get in touch with you, what do you do as a daily or regular practice that gives you the best opportunity to be the best version of yourself?
My daily practice. Like, since having kids, the practice of this really refined, wake up, do Tai Chi, something that was really refined, which I did for a long time in the past. There's a lot of Tai Chi and meditation and stretching, spending time in nature. The simplest things now is try not to look at a phone or a screen, which is like emails and all of the different comms and stuff, which are always floating around when you're busy. And I try and get the natural light. I try and get outside and, fill my body with some sunlight and walk around. I do really simple things now. If that opens up into hey, everyone's okay and I can spend 10 minutes now and do something like some Tai Chi or just sit by myself, I will, I think just having awareness that there's this world story that's very consuming, and not letting that just consume me from the get-go. Having time to sort of tune into myself and the bigger picture, the bigger stage before I start. That's kind of what I'd say my daily drop-in is, for sure.
I love it. And not having it so rigid, being conversant with the responsibilities in your life at a given point in time and reacting as best as you can in the moment.
That's it. Yeah.
I love it. So where can people find out a little bit more about you and about Tattoo Pathway?
Yeah, okay. So tattoopathway.com is our page where, depending on when this goes up, we're just about to start our yearly calendar for the community. And so that's kind of the main point of working with people this year, is we're just getting everyone into this space. It's like a real sort of easy access space where people can be going through, like we're talking about with those breadcrumb fingerprints, people that already have lots of tattoos and want to sort of understand where they're at or make sense of things. Maybe they do have tattoo regret. Maybe some things just don't feel very comfortable or cohesive in their tattoos. We look at everything together. We've got this whole coursework, because we've run courses a few times to just try and get people's perspective on tattooing restructured in a way. That whole coursework's there in the community for people, but we're really trying to do these sort of engagements where we're not just going through a textbook. People are actively in a process of understanding and working towards their next tattoo. So we've got lots of tools and different processes for people that we've found are really applicable and useful for them to make sure their tattoos land somewhere that, you know, they might not instantly be satisfied in this process, but it's like in 10 years, that tattoo is going to be the perfect fit for you because you'll understand everything a lot better, you know, including yourself.
Yeah.
So Tattoo Pathway is the main place. I do have Instagram, the Mark of Nara, but you know, I'm not on there as much. So, and I've got a podcast as well, not as regular as some. Try and get one out a month where I'm talking to other artists and other people that are, I guess, in the periphery of more than tattooing, you know, some therapists and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's Tattoos with Intention.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Excellent. And I'll get all the links to that in the show notes for this particular podcast as well. Mark, my friend, thank you very, very much for taking the time to come and chat with me today.
No worries. Thank you, Gary. I appreciate your time and energy. Hopefully it's valuable for your listeners.